Hey, we're tackling chapter 8, Adolescence. Oh boy, that ought to be fun. Anyway, this is the 10th week, and we're tackling, I guess there's 7 weeks left. That's what Avery was saying yesterday. Mr. Denny, Dr. Denny, that's what President Russell calls him. Anyway, we're talking about chapter 8. Um, Big changes, huge changes during adolescence. This is when uh, the child becomes an adult. The markers of adolescence, rite of passage may include religious blessings, separation from the family, severe tests of strength and endurance, marking the body in some way, or acts of magic. In some cultures, they are scarred. In some cultures, their uh, body parts are cut. There is lots of things that people do around the world to mark adulthood. Some people change the names of the individuals, um, and of course, it all begins with puberty. Puberty is when the changes start to take place. My grandson is starting to go through puberty. He and we could tell it because he started having a different odor. He started having underarm odor, whereas before he didn't, and now he is starting to become an adult, I guess. My daughter's not real happy about it, but there's not a whole lot that she can do, and he is starting to grow. He's starting to get thicker, and of course. Um, we are all quite aware of it because of the odor. The process leads to sexual maturity or fertility, and of course, that is down the road for him. He's only 10 years old, so he's only 9 years old. Wait a minute. Yeah, he's 9 years old. He'll be 10 in July. So there are rites of passage. If you're Jewish, then you go through a bar mitzvah if you're a male, a bar mitzvah if you're a girl, where you are introduced into the Jewish religion. Um, this is in Africa. I am a graduate. They graduate from school. This is another ceremony from Africa. They dance in the adult dance. This is the coming of age for the Apache. It's called the sunrise ceremony. It's a 4-day ceremony. Um, in some cultures in the United States, it's when you can drink alcohol and not get drunk, I guess. This is a confirmation. This young lady is Catholic, and she is being confirmed into the Catholic Church. In the Spanish world, in the Spanish-speaking world, especially in South America and Mexico, they have a quinceañera. It's when a female becomes a woman at age 15. She has a big party. She has an escort. They spend a lot of money on quinceañeras. Quinceañera means of 15. And these are some of the things that happen. She'll have her first drink of alcohol, theoretically. This is her family supporting her. And of course, she dresses in an adult way and has her hair in an adult way. The Canalda ceremony is the Navajo ceremony, and I don't have, I can tell you right now, I've never been to a Canalda, and this is the information I got off the internet, so don't beat me to death because of this. Um, this is what the internet said. I was looking up I was looking up the Apache sunrise ceremony, and it seems to be very similar to this. The first day ceremony, in the first day, they comb the young lady's hair. They dress her in buckskin. Um, she molds something. I'm not really sure what. She runs, she grinds corn. She puts a pot of wheat near the outdoor cooking fire. And this is after she has molded something. I'm not really sure what she's molding. The second day, she runs in the morning. First thing in the morning, she grinds corn. During the day, she spreads wheat in the sun to dry after digging a pit to cook the canal, the cake in. She soaks corn husks um, while working on the cake batter. The third day, she runs in the morning. She grinds corn. She digs her pit. She builds a fire. She makes mush, and this is the mush. I think this is the blue cornmeal mush. She puts batter in the pit and blesses it. They cover the pit and they gather soapweed, root, and white clay for the morning during the sing. Then the fourth day, she runs at dawn. She starts running to the east while 4 songs are sung. Um, 1/12 word song, unless the ceremony is the first canal, when the song is omitted. I'm not exactly sure what that means. They make an offering to Mother Earth. They prepare white clay basket during the racing songs. She lifts children after the molding. The girl goes back into the hogan after returning goods and reties her hair. This is all from the internet, so you guys can correct me on all this stuff. It may be that different areas of the reservation do it differently, but this is from somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where. Opportunities and risks of adolescence. Opportunities. They grow physically, so their physical dimensions change. Cognitive and social competence. They gain cognitive and social competence. They gain autonomy from their parents. Uh, they gain self-esteem, and of course, they can start intimate relations. The risk of adolescence, it's difficult handling so many changes at once and may need help to overcome dangers along the way. There are the current risks that we have especially in the United States. Heavy drinking is a possibility when they start adolescence. Drug abuse, of course, sexual activity may start at this point, and gang activity, and that's what we're looking at here. These are thugs, probably 10-year-old thugs or 12-year-old thugs. They don't look too mean to me, but I guess they're supposed to. How puberty begins is that there's a sharp increase in the production of sex hormones, which leads to rapid growth in height and weight, changes in the body proportions and form, attainment of sexual maturity, the estrogen levels of the individual increase in the young female, especially estradiol, which has increased 8 times to create the female physical form. In as far as males are concerned, their androgens increase. Testosterone may increase 20 times to create the male form. Of course, they grow. And we're going to talk about the primary and secondary sexual characteristics in just a second. There's a 7-year range for the onset of puberty in both boys and girls, and we're going to talk about this in just a second. The process typically takes about 4 years for both sexes and begins about 2 or 3 years earlier in girls than boys. And this is one of the things that my grandson is dealing with right now. The boys aren't growing, but the girls are. So the girls are taller. They have started becoming young women. The boys are just at the beginning of all of this whole process. So you'll see these two individuals are in the same grade, um, and evidently they're friends, but he hasn't started his, his adolescent growing yet, and she has. The timing sequence, the signs of maturation, the average age for boys is around age 12. My grandson is about to be 10. Uh, they usually start sometime between age 9 and age 16. The average age for girls is around age 9. So it's starting in his class. It's anywhere between age 6 and age 14. The signs, there's an adolescent growth spurt, and of course the young ladies start growing before the young men do. There's a development of pubic hair, deeper, their voice becomes deeper, and they have muscular growth. The primary sexual characteristics are the ones that you're born with. So the primary sexual characteristics are the sex organs. For the young female, it's there. She does have ovaries. She has fallopian tubes. The uterus. This is all inside. The only thing that is obvious is the fact that she has a vagina and not a penis. For the males, a little bit more obvious. He has testes. He has a scrotum, which contain his testes, and he has a penis, which makes him a male. And on the inside, of course, he has his seminal vesicles and his prostate gland. These are your primary sexual characteristics. It's what you're born with. And now it's time for their secondary sexual characteristics. This is what grows. This is what makes the individual an adult. For the male, they grow, their testicles will become enlarged. They will start growing pubic hair, which is one of the things that makes it obvious that they are going through puberty. Their chest becomes larger. They will have axillary hair. They will start growing hair in their armpits. Their muscles will become larger, and their voice becomes deeper. The male voice becomes deeper, especially. One of the reasons that the male voice is deeper is because he has a voice box. His voice box is his Adam's apple, and it becomes quite prominent. Whereas if you look at a young boy's neck, they don't have their Adam's apple isn't there yet. As soon as he starts to go through puberty, the voice box will grow and become deeper, of course. The secondary sexual characteristics for the female, a little bit more obvious. The breasts will enlarge. There's an enlargement of the uterus and the vagina as well, but it's not nearly as obvious as it is for the male. There is a narrowing, actually a narrowing of the shoulders. There's a widening of the hips, which is fairly obvious. Their voice becomes more high-pitched, whereas before, boys and girls, it's very difficult to tell whether you're speaking to a male or a female. The female voice will become higher-pitched, and of course, they will grow pubic hair as well. Those are the secondary sexual characteristics for both males and females. A lot of it has to do with hair growth. Hair growth in the armpits and hair growth in the pubic area. For the males, they'll grow a lot more hair. They potentially will grow hair on their chests and on their legs. The female will grow hair on her legs as well, and her arm hair will increase, as will the males. They will start growing hair all over. And the female will too, but it's not nearly as much hair as the males have. And here we go. Growth of the breast for the female, somewhere between the age 6 and 13. Pubic hair growth, same thing, between age 6 and 14. Body growth, somewhere between 9.5 and 14.5. They'll have their first period sometime between age 10 and age 16. Their underarm hair, about 2 years after the appearance of pubic hair, their underarm hair will start growing. Increased output of oil and sweat producing glands, which may lead to acne, of course, about the same time as the appearance of the underarm hair. And the males, it follows a similar pattern. Growth of the testes in the scrotal sac sometime between age 10 and 13 and a half. Growth of pubic hair sometime between 12 and 16. Body growth sometime between 10 and a half and 16. Growth of the penis and prostate gland sometime between age 11 and 14 and a half. And the seminal vesicles. There's a change in the voice. First ejaculation of semen, change of voice about the same time as the growth of the penis. The first ejaculation of semen about 1 year after beginning of growth of the penis. Facial and underarm hair about 2 years after the appearance of pubic hair. Increased output of oil and sweat producing glands, which may lead to acne about the same time as appearance of underarm hair. The reality is that males tend to have oilier skin than females do, and so their acne tends to be a little bit more prominent. Males can reproduce as soon as their sperm appears. Well, probably not. One of the things that has to happen in order for a male to be able to reproduce is that the male has to produce enough sperm in order to be able to impregnate a female. What is that? It's about 30,000 per second. That's just the way it works. And it takes a little bit of time. So what will happen is the male will have nocturnal emissions. They'll ejaculate while they're asleep, and probably this will not contain very many sperm. It's certainly not enough to impregnate somebody, and it will take a couple of years before they start producing sperm at the level where they can actually reproduce. The human body practices all the necessary functions before the function is actually needed. Babies will move inside the womb. The newborn will exercise their limbs. Pre-adolescent boys who have not been sexualized will experience the same reflexive activity with erections while they are asleep. And this isn't their fault. It's not like they're thinking about sex. It is just that this is the way it works. This is a natural reflex of the human body, of the male human body. This activity will continue all their lives as a brain check to make sure that all the equipment still works. As they get older, of course, they will have erections when they wake up. A lot of times it will wake them up, and even into their 80s and 90s and 100s. As old men, they will have erections while they are asleep. At about age 13, the male adolescent may have actual ejaculations of semen during his nightly erections. These are known as nocturnal emissions or wet dreams, and is an involuntary reflexive act. The boy's first ejaculation is called spermarcy. That's first sperm. Maybe several years before the sperm he produces are actually produced in large enough numbers and in correct form to actually impregnate a woman. The sign of maturity for girls is menstruation. When the uterus prepares itself for implantation by the fertilized ova, the first menstruation is called menarche and occurs sometime around the 12th or the 13th year. However, menarche can occur between the ages of 10 to 17. I was talking to my mother. My mother was born in 1915, and she didn't have her first period until she was 15 or 16 years old, which seems late, but that was fairly common back then. One of the reasons was because she was going through the Depression, and nutrition was not very good. It was okay for her and her family because they lived on a farm, but other people that she went to school with, other young ladies that she went to school with, it was fairly common for them not to start having periods until they were 15 or 16 years old. That was about average back then. Now, of course, it has gone back because of nutritional aspects. Research shows that girls from affectionate families actually show a more delayed menarche. Girls from single mother homes and ones without affection in their families tended to reach menarche earlier so that they potentially can move out of the house, as curious as that may be. While maturation and sexuality have been taboo subjects in many areas of the world for a long time, doctors and other people who are aware of such things have noticed that menarche is happening earlier and earlier than it ever has before. This is a phenomenon known as secular trend. So this is one of the things that we are noticing. It may have something to do with more single parent families. We're not exactly sure what's going on, but we see it as around the world. This isn't just in the United States. This is around the world. Doctors and researchers think that we are seeing a secular trend because better health due to better nutrition, lower rates of communicable diseases due to immunizations, greater access to health care. Children raised in a home with a non-biological parent have earlier onset puberty. Synthetic hormones in the water supply, stressful family environment. These may all be causing a secular trend. Cultural differences. There are differences around the world. Everybody doesn't mature exactly the same. In the Kikuyu adolescents, boys show puberty before the females do. This is an African tribe. Chinese adolescents, girls develop pubic hair before breast buds. This is opposite of the way it works in the Western pattern. The Western pattern is for the young lady to grow breast buds first and then to grow her pubic hair. African American adolescents, girls develop breast buds and pubic hair earlier than white girls tend to do. Hormonal changes in puberty. Girls and boys follow very different hormonal paths at this life cycle. And as you can see, the estradiol level for young ladies and testosterone. Both males and females both have estradiol and testosterone. They have it at different levels, of course. And as you can see, the males just increase as soon as puberty starts. It just explodes. Estradiol not quite at the same level. Anyway. Timing of the physical changes of puberty, skin oil, and sweat for girls and boys, as you can see. Young ladies start a little bit earlier. Underarm hair, menarche, sperm production, change of voice. This is more prevalent in males than it is in females. And pubic hair. This is age 8. Young lady may grow pubic hair as early as age 8. And for males, it doesn't start until about age 10. Early maturation in males leads to more poised, relaxed, good-natured individuals. They tend to be more popular with their peers. These individuals are likely to be leaders. They're less impulsive than late maturers. So as far as males are concerned, being an early maturing male is a good thing because they become leaders, they become more poised, they have more confidence in themselves. Late maturation in males leads to feeling more inadequate, being more self-conscious and rejected and dominated. They're more dependent, aggressive, insecure, or depressed. They have more conflict with parents and more trouble in school. They have poor social and coping skills, and they think less of themselves because they are growing slower than their male peers. So as far as males are concerned, it's much better to be an early maturing male than it is to be a late maturing male. Early maturation in females leads to being less sociable, being less expressive, being less poised, more introverted and shy. They're more vulnerable to psychological distress and remain so at least through the mid-teens. They are more negative about menarche than later maturing girls. They're more likely to become sexually active with older boys because the boys will not leave them alone. Late maturing females tend to be happier than their early maturing peers. They seem to enjoy the protection of childhood into adolescence. They're more likely to do well and stay in school. They're more sexual. They become sexually active later. They are more likely to go to college. So as far as young females are concerned, it's much better to be a late maturing female than an early maturing female. As far as males are concerned, it's better to be an early maturing male than a late maturing male. Uh, Physical activity is good for everyone. It improves strength and endurance. It helps build healthy bones and muscles. It helps control weight. It reduces anxiety and stress. It increases self-confidence. And this is one of the reasons that schools had physical education programs through the middle school into the early high school. That it is so that they could develop all of these positive patterns. Sleep needs: adolescents or pre-adolescents who have irregular sleep schedules are chronically sleep deprived and sleepy in the daytime. They show symptoms of depression and do poorly in school. Nutrition and eating disorders. Obesity is the most common eating disorder in the United States due to too little physical activity and poor eating habits. By age 15, more than half the girls in 16 countries are dieting and think that they should be dieting. Anorexia nervosa is a distorted body image which leads to eating very little or starving oneself. Symptoms include inability to maintain body weight, fear of weight gain, lack of menstruation, distorted body image. Some researchers have found a connection between anorexic daughters and competitive mothers. This is an individual. This is what she looked like before she started dieting, and this is what she looked like when she had full-blown anorexia. As you can see, vast difference between the two. Bulimia nervosa, they tend to maintain normal body weight and recognize abnormal eating patterns. They go on huge eating binges within a short time, usually 2 hours or less, and then they try to undo the high caloric intake by self-induced vomiting, strict dieting, or fasting. They engage in excessively vigorous exercise. They may take laxatives, enemas, or diuretics to purge their body of the extra weight. Audrey Hepburn was a bulimic for most of her life. She took laxatives, and eventually she died of colon cancer because she overactivated that portion of her body. Eating disorders are more common in cultures that emphasize slimness. Treatment options: you can hospitalize these individuals, you can give them medication. Usually, one of the medications that you're giving them is a antidepressant. And of course, you can talk to them, so use psychotherapy. 1/3 of individuals treated for anorexia remain ill. You can't talk their brains out of seeing themselves as fat. 1/2 the individuals treated for bulimia will relapse. It's too easy to lose weight that way. Continuing problems as individuals dealing with these disorders age. Use and abuse of drugs. Substance abuse is the harmful use of alcohol or other drugs. A poorly adapted behavior pattern lasting more than 1 month. Substance dependence or addiction may be psychological or physiological or both. Likely it will continue into adulthood. And this is one of the problems. You know, kids will be kids. The reality is that the patterns they develop as adolescents, very often they will carry into their adulthood. Or it will become a coping technique for them. If they were depressed when they were an adolescent, so they got drunk. When they get depressed as an adult, the first thing that they will turn to is alcohol. While substance abuse is rare before adolescence, it is common by the end of adolescence. By graduation, rates of marijuana use by seniors is higher than cigarettes. Substance use is highest in Native American and lowest in African American and Asian Americans, while teenage substance use has gone down in comparison to previous generations, it is still much higher than is comfortable for society. And when the abuse is in your family, a serious tragedy can occur. It is during adolescence that many teenagers are introduced to their first step on a possible road to adult addiction. The gateway drugs are drugs that in and of themselves are not seriously addictive, but drugs that set a precedent of need that can only be fulfilled with more of the gateway drugs or stronger, more addictive drugs. And it usually starts actually with cigarettes, not with alcohol. So they start smoking, and then they because they're cool, of course, they start drinking, and then they turn to marijuana. Now, the reality is that nicotine is the most addictive substance known to man, as weird as that may sound. So starting smoking is not a really good idea. It's fairly destructive. Uh, it really can damage the body, but so can alcohol, and so can marijuana. These are the gateway drugs. Romantic relationships increase over time. Asian cultures later than other groups. Romance is less formal than previous years. Relationships and sexuality are viewed differently due to culture. Really all depends on what culture you come from. Permissive cultures tolerate sexuality. Semi-restrictive cultures have prohibitions. Restrictive cultures have strong prohibitions. Um, a restrictive culture would be the Muslim culture, um, or the Latina culture. In many Hispanic countries, a young lady cannot go outside unless after she goes through her quinceañera. She can't go anywhere without a chaperone. This is a very restrictive culture, or a more restrictive culture. Of course, in the Muslim world, women are required to cover themselves all the time, to keep themselves covered after they go through puberty. And permissive cultures, we have a permissive culture in the United States, but not as permissive as some countries. In Holland, in the Netherlands, if you are sexually active at age, you a girl can live with a man at age 12 if her parents agree to it. So you know, if a guy has a girlfriend who's 12 or 13 years old, she can move in with him, and it's perfectly legal there. It would be statutory rape in the United States, but it's perfectly legal in the Netherlands. So that's a really permissive society, and a little bit different. 47.8% of U.S. high school students have had sexual intercourse. This worries some researchers because adolescents are not emotionally mature enough to handle the aftermath of sexual activity, and usually the aftermath, what we're really talking about. Well, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about pregnancy, of course, and we're also talking about sexually transmitted infections. Only about 2/3 of adolescents protect themselves by using a condom. This is one of the reasons why in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, you could get condoms at high schools. High schools were handing out condoms, hoping that this would become a habit. Teenage pregnancy is always a possibility, and of course, it's pretty bad in the United States. Worldwide, individuals below the age of 25 account for about 45% of all HIV infections. 11% of all births in the world are to teenage mothers, while individuals between the age of 15 and 24 only represent 25% of the population. They represent 50% of all sexually transmitted diseases. And the reason I'm showing you these pictures is because this is a 15-year-old who has a baby. This is a 5-year-old girl that was pregnant. This was in Ecuador. This is her with her son. She was only 5 years and 8 months when she delivered her son. Naturally, by the way, she delivered the baby naturally. They never did find out who the father was, even though her father was arrested for, um, and they didn't accuse him of impregnating his daughter, but he allowed his daughter to become impregnated, and they arrested him. Eventually, they let him go. She's still alive, by the way. Her name's Lena Medina, and she is 88 years old, but she is the youngest girl to ever give birth to a child. She gave birth at the age of 5 years and 8 months. She's 7 in this picture, or 6 or 7 years old in this picture. There's the doctor that delivered the baby. You can look it up on the internet. It's on Wikipedia. You can see all the youngest women that have ever given birth to girls that have given birth to babies, and who the father was. It's really kind of fascinating. Lena Medina, of course, she has like 5 or 6 names, but Lena Medina. Teenage pregnancy rates in the developed countries, as you can see, Italy, the Netherlands, despite the fact that 12-year-olds can live with their boyfriends, Spain, Belgium, Sweden, Czech Republic, and of course the highest teen birth rate is in the United States. The APA has recently defined the changing sexual mores in the United States as sexualization, a social phenomenon where people are valued for their sexual appeal and behavior and nothing else. And this is known as sexualization. This is especially a current problem with females as we are bombarded by Sports Illustrated swimsuit models and Victoria's Secret angels in their underwear. It isn't hard to see how girls might base their self-worth on identifying as sexual beings. And unfortunately, this is the way things seem to be. Piaget's stage of formal operations usually develops around age 11. Individuals develop, we're not going to talk about sexualization anymore. We're going to talk about aspects of cognitive maturation. Piaget's stage of formal operation usually develops around age 11. Individuals develop the capacity for abstract thought, leading to a new, more flexible way to manipulate information. They can use symbols, they can understand metaphor and allegory, they can imagine possibilities, and can form and test hypotheses. So what is that? The 6th grade, that's middle school, is when the formal operation stage starts. Formal operations give the individual the ability to perform abstract thought such as historical time, extraterrestrial space, algebra and calculus. You know, it really amazes me. I talk to people about the Vietnam War. Of course, I lived through the Vietnam War. I lived through the Korean War. Actually, I was 1 year old when it started, and it didn't end until I was 5. I was 5 years old. So I lived through the Korean War. It didn't actually end. They had a ceasefire that has gone on since then. But the Vietnam War, of course, I lived through that one. I lived through that. I was an adult at that time, and I actually was in the military during the Vietnam War. Historical time, this is kind of amazes me because people don't understand when all of these things took place. Um, the Long Walk for the Navajo people, 1864. What else was happening in 1864? Is that important? Well, sure, that's one of the reasons that the Long Walk took place. The Civil War was going on in 1864. It started in 1861 and ended in 1865. So there were lots of problems going on in the United States at the time, and that was one of the reasons why they felt like something needed to happen with hostile tribes. And of course, the Navajo weren't the only ones that were dealt with. The Sioux in the north had won a war, Red Cloud's War. The Cheyenne were attacking. The Pawnee were attacking wagon trains going across the United States. There was a lot going on. They were chasing different Apache bands in Arizona and New Mexico at the time. A lot of stuff was going on. Anyway, historical time. People don't understand when things happen. And it's, of course, when we talk about time, we have to talk about a linear time. Linear time. Things, time marches on and it goes from one place to the other. Um, so we're talking about the Russians attacking Ukraine now. We can talk about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that started after 9/11. That was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago that all this stuff took place. But historical time, people just don't understand when things happen. When were the hippies? Well, the hippies were in the 60s and 70s. That's historical. Um, and people don't think of that. They think, well, it happened yesterday afternoon. Well, no, it didn't. That was 2 generations ago or 3 generations ago. Extraterrestrial time has to do with outer space and the concept that everything isn't here. It's really kind of interesting because right now I'm reading a book called Raintree County, and this guy thinks of Raintree County as the world. That's it. Of course, the book takes place in the 1860s, 1840s actually. It starts in the 1840s. And of course, their ability to travel, they could only travel from one corner of the county to the other in a day. And for that reason, of course, nobody went very far because it took too long to get from one place to another. So his concept of space is Henry County, is Raintree County actually, Henry County, Indiana. So extraterrestrial space at this point in time with formal operations, we can think of outer space. And of course, now that we have Star Wars and we have some of the other movies about outer space, The Martian and whatnot, and we see pictures of Mars and we see pictures of outer space. Of course, it's easier for us to understand these things. But as a child, of course, sometimes we don't have this concept. So extraterrestrial space is another abstract thought that we can have. Algebra and calculus, allowing symbols to represent symbols. Think in terms of what might be, not just what is. They can think in context of idealism. This has a lot to do with religion. Religion doesn't really make a lot of sense until you go through the formal operations stage. Until then, of course, you just believe whatever you're told, but at the point of formal operations, now we can think in the abstract, therefore we can argue with religious thought. Piaget's formal operation stage of cognitive development allows the individual to form hypotheses and develop means to test the hypothesis through deductive reasoning. Other developmental psychologists, including the author of your book, that's Arnett, have estimated that between 1/3 and 1/2 of late adolescents and adults do not develop and or do not use abstract thought. As weird as that may seem. Though adolescents may look like adults, most adolescents, especially males, do not yet have a mature prefrontal lobe. Studies looking at the activity of the brain found that while adults tended to process emergency information in the prefrontal lobe, where reasonable thought takes place, adolescents process the information through the amygdala, where emotional arousal and instinctual thought takes place. And this is one of the things that you can take to the bank is the idea, and this is one of the reasons why adolescents get upset so frequently. It's because they're not really using their prefrontal lobe to do their thinking. They're using the emotional portion of their brain, their amygdala, to process this information. This may account for increased impulsive, risky behavior, especially in males, and account for driving, drug use, and sexual activity that can cause lots and lots of problems. Cognitive maturation, I'm going to show you a picture. This is a movie that was made in the 1960s, I think. There we go. Okay. This is a movie you've never seen. I'm sure you've never seen it. It's a pretty bad movie. There we go.
We're going to make 30 a mandatory retirement age. And we're going to set up rehabilitation camps, mercy centers in every state of the Union. Citizens will report to them after 5 years, at the age of 35. And there, in groovy surroundings, we're going to psych them all out on LSD, babies. That way, they're not going to hurt you, and they're not going to hurt me. And babies, they're not even going to hurt themselves anymore. They won't draft us. We'll draft them. And some of them are really going to dig it. And that's going to be the real mother-loving gas. There's going to be cats who want to split from taxes, diners club, crazy birds, crazy wives, and crazy husbands. Millions, true. But millions are going to go willingly. Just tell them they don't owe nobody nothing. And baby, what a wrap-up.
Suffer unto me, little old lady. The best campaign dinners are no campaign dinners. Contribute, contribute, contribute to yourself. The best campaign dinners are no campaign dinners. Contribute, contribute, contribute to yourself.
Miss Plato, hey, Miss Plato, baby, your husband is very happy in the camps. Your husband would like it.
That's enough. Okay. Wild in the Streets. It's a movie made in the 60s, and the idea was that the adolescent brain was taking over the United States. And of course, that was a rock star that was able to do that. Anyway, it's a really crazy movie that nobody remembers except me, I guess. Anyway, Wild in the Streets. As funny as it is. Anyway, okay, so wait a minute. Oh, okay, there we go. Alkine, immature aspects of adolescent thought manifests itself in at least 6 characteristic ways. Idealism and criticalness. They're convinced that they know better than adults how to run the world. And of course, that's what we saw in Wild in the Streets. Argumentativeness. They often become argumentative as they marshal facts and logic to build a case. Indecisiveness. Adolescents can keep many alternatives in mind at the same time, yet they lack effective strategies for choosing among them. Remember, they're using their amygdalas, not their prefrontal lobes, to do their thinking for them. Apparent hypocrisy. Teens do not recognize the difference between expressing an ideal and making the sacrifices necessary to live up to it. Self-consciousness. Adolescents often assume that everyone else is thinking about the same thing that they're thinking about, and that's usually themselves, and this is known as imaginary audience. Specialness and invulnerability. Adolescents think that they are special and that their experience is unique and that they are not subject to the rules that govern the rest of the world, and this is known as personal fable. This is one of the things that gets adolescents in trouble a lot. Racing cars, and of course, in my day, it was everybody, not everybody. People were drag racing, and there were wrecks and accidents. I mean, anyway, there was a lot of drag racing taking place. People were getting the biggest engines and the smallest cars, trying to go faster. This was the big deal back in my day. Of course, you guys don't do that anymore, and that's because you're smarter than we were. But I had friends that would jack their cars up and put slicks on the back of their cars so that they would look like they were fast, even if they weren't fast. And that was the deal. That was what everybody wanted. They wanted fast cars and muscle cars. This is back during the era of the muscle cars. Didn't make a lot of sense. Kohlberg's levels and stages, contrary to socialization theory, which attributes moral behavior to early upbringing and internalization of societal standards, the cognitive developmental approach holds that people gradually develop their own moral code as they reach higher and higher levels of thinking. And this is the story that Kohlberg used to find out people's moral level. In Europe, a woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, and the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later. But the druggist said, "No, I discovered the drug and I am going to make money from it." So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? That is Heinz's moral dilemma. Should he have done that? So you can think to yourself as to what you think he should have done. Was it okay for him to break into the man's store and steal the drug to save his wife's life? And this is what Kohlberg determined. Level 1 is the pre-conventional morality. This is what children age 4 to 10 tended to think about. People act under external controls, obeying rules to avoid punishment or to get rewards. And of course, this is the way most children are raised. The parents punish them if they do what they are not supposed to do, and they give them rewards if they do what they are supposed to do. So stage one of the pre-conventional morality, orientation toward punishment and obedience. It's okay for him to steal the drug because it is really only worth $200. And the other idea was that he shouldn't steal because it's a crime. Stage two of the pre-conventional morality, conforming to the rules because of self-interest. It is all right to steal because he wants to save his wife's life. He shouldn't steal because it is all right to make a profit. Level two, the conventional morality. People are concerned about being good, pleasing others, and maintaining the social order. This is the conventional morality is usually what individuals come up with after age 10. Stage three, maintaining mutual relations, approval of others, following the golden rule. A good husband should steal the drug. He shouldn't steal. If his wife dies, it won't be his fault. As long as he's not blamed for it, I guess it's okay. Stage four, developing a social concern and conscience. He should steal it, otherwise his wife's death is his fault. It is always wrong to steal despite the reason. And this is level two, the conventional morality. Post-conventional morality recognizes conflicts between moral standards and makes their own judgment on the basis of principles of right, fairness, and justice. And the post-conventional morality is something that philosophers have come up with. So if you don't have if you have the conventional morality, that makes sense. Post-conventional morality, this is not nearly as common. Stage five, morality of contract of individual rights and of democratically accepted law. Of course, not everybody in the United States accepts democratic law. Taking the drug may not be right, but it is justified. Extreme circumstances do not justify breaking the law. And the last is stage six, morality of universal ethical principles. Heinz is morally right to steal. He must respect the sanctity of life. And the last is Heinz should act in accordance with all lives affected. So there you go, the three levels of Kohlberg's three levels of morality. Evaluating Kohlberg's theory, instead of viewing morality solely as attaining control over self-regulating impulses, investigators now look at how children make moral judgments based on their growing understanding of the social world. Neither Kohlberg nor Piaget considered parents important in moral development. Both psychologists grew up in a time where social control was stronger than individual or familial control. Other researchers have discovered that when parents speak to and listen to their children about their morality, children tend to advance through the stages of moral development much faster. Now, the reality is, and what they're talking about here, is Piaget did most of his research in the beginning of the 20th century, and Kohlberg did most of his research in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. He actually died in the 1970s. So the reality is that there was a lot going on, and according to both Piaget and Kohlberg, according to what was going on in the world at that time, education was very, very important. Family lives were not nearly as important, and this is when American Indians were being sent to boarding schools. So the idea was that education was the prime important aspect of your life, and this is what was going on at the time. And this went on through the 1970s into the 1980s and in the beginning of the 1990s, and of course now things have changed. Our ideas have changed because there's a lot more going on with social media and whatnot. So Kohlberg and Piaget, the idea that that education controlled what people think, that was okay for their time. But I think things have changed, and you would understand this if you understand what was the propaganda that was being spewed during the boarding school era for American Indians. Then you understand how strong they thought that education was, that you could actually change people forever with an educational process. Morality may be in the eye of the beholder. Kohlberg may do little but reflect Western morality and assume it is universal, and I think that's probably true. Buddhist monks in India actually scored lower on Kohlberg's dilemma than lay people did. Some feel that Kohlberg's stage 5 and 6 are possible only for individuals following a specific type of philosophical reflection, and I would agree with that. Having read a lot of philosophy, I understand that a lot of times philosophers are talking about ideal worlds rather than the actual world. And I think that's what Kohlberg was talking about at the same time. One of the things you need to know about Kohlberg was that he lived almost his entire life in the Boston area, and he taught at Harvard. So it's possible that his idea of what was going on in the world was not what actually was going on outside of Boston. Right and wrong has different meanings in other cultures. Okay, so let's talk about morality issues. Is the death penalty moral? And you can make your own decisions. We're going to talk about other moral issues other than the death penalty. They gave this to a huge number of people, and this is what they determined. 66% felt that the death penalty was moral. 66%. 27 felt that it was morally unacceptable. And of course, the difference between the two, this should be 100%, but the reality is that a lot of people don't want to answer these questions, or they say, I don't know, or maybe, or things like that. 66% felt that the death penalty was moral. 27% felt that it was unacceptable, morally unacceptable. How about divorce? Is divorce acceptable? Your culture may say that divorce should never happen. Your religious ideas may be that people should never get divorced. So how do you feel? Is it moral to be divorced? 65% felt that divorce is morally acceptable. 26% did not think that divorce was morally acceptable. And of course, I've been divorced twice, so I feel that it's morally acceptable. And I don't go to church, so my church isn't going to tell me I'm wrong. Medical research using stem cells obtained from human embryos. This was a huge question during the Bush administration. George Bush was president between 2000 and 2008. And during his administration, this question came up. Should we use stem cells that are obtained from human embryos? What would they do? They would take the stem cells from aborted fetuses or from aborted fetuses and do research with it. And it was actually passed in Congress, and George W. Bush vetoed the bill. And it's we still are not using stem cells from aborted fetuses, from embryos. So the question is it moral or is it not moral? And the answer was 64% felt that stem cell research was morally acceptable. 30% felt that stem cell research was morally wrong. So Bush would be part of the 30%, but it's the law of the land. Stem cell research is being done in Canada. It's being done all over the world. It's just not being done in the United States. Gambling. Is gambling morally acceptable? You can make your own decision. 63% felt that it was morally wrong to gamble. 32% felt that it was morally acceptable. I don't gamble myself. I don't think it's morally wrong. I just think it's kind of stupid to give your money away to people you don't know. If I'm going to give my money away, I'd rather give it away to people that I know. And, I've been fairly generous in my time, but I certainly don't gamble and give it to people owning casinos. Suicide. Is suicide morally wrong, or is it morally incorrect? There are certain religions that feel that um, suicide is a sin. But do you think it's morally right or morally wrong? And I actually don't have any statistics on this because it is so controversial. How about cloning humans? I do have statistics on cloning humans. Is cloning humans morally right, or is it morally wrong? Should we be able to clone humans? And 18% think that cloning humans should be done, and 86% think it's unacceptable to clone humans. Polygamy, when one husband has more than one wife at the same time, is this morally right or morally wrong? Of course, there's a section of the Mormon Church that believes that polygamy is okay. And the results, 8% think it's acceptable and 90% think it's unacceptable. Moral issues, married men and women having an affair, is that acceptable or not acceptable? The reason I have a picture of Be My Little General. He's a general. This is General Petraeus. He was in charge of the war in Iraq, and he had an affair with this young lady. She is a reporter. You can still see I saw him on CNN the other day. Anyway, he lost his job because of the affair that he had with this woman. So is it morally right or morally wrong? And the answer is 6% think that affairs are acceptable. 91% think that they're unacceptable. Ugly guys like me hope that they that they're unacceptable because I certainly don't want to be sharing my life with anybody, giving her any ideas. Medical testing on animals, is it morally right or morally wrong? You may think that rats are cute. I personally don't care what they do with that rat. 59% think it's acceptable and 37% think it's unacceptable. Sex between unmarried man and a woman. This is known as fornication. Of course, that's an old term. Premarital sex, is it okay? And the answer is, you may think, oh my goodness, they should never ever be allowed to have sex. 59% think it's acceptable and 38% think it's unacceptable. As children grow into adolescence, their problem-solving skills continue to improve. Adolescents develop the ability to carefully consider a problem using whatever steps and in whatever order necessary, a process known as task analysis. After determining the process of problem solving, the individual will encode the process. The problem solving process and encoding the information is part of dialectical reasoning. As children age, their families become less and less important to them, and their peers and friends become more important. Influence shifts from family to friends. In adolescence, this shift becomes more profound as peers begin taking up more and more time. Since masses of people are unwieldy, adolescents will form friendship groups that will become very important to these high school aged individual. And if you can think of all of your friends in high school, there was probably a small group that you hung around with more than anyone else. Adolescents who have similar desires and interests will tend to interact with one another on a frequent basis, forming a crowd. There are lots of different ways of seeing these people. Jocks, populars, nerds, grunges, goths, thugs, brains. Here we have hipsters, indies, punks, scene. I'm not sure what a scene is, and a gamer. This is from another group. These are crowds. So you can be in the punk crowd, or you can be in the hipster crowd, or you can be a thug, or a goth, or a grunge. Anyway, I don't know if your high school had all of these. My high school had jocks, populars, and nerds. The rest of it was not something that we had. In Japan, of course, this is, this happens all the time. These are who was Sailor Moon, I think. These are girls that dress up like Sailor Moon. Normally, crowds are so large with people falling in and out so frequently that it is impossible to know everyone in the group. The small group of intimates that someone knows in a crowd is known as a clique, and of course, this would be a clique. High school is no picnic anywhere, and this is in Japan. I got this off the internet. The top group, or the group that is the most popular, are the jocks, the bad kids, the b-boys, the dumb sluts, the musicians, the players, the bullies, the drunken party people, the semi-dropout bikers, and the skaters, and those would be the ones in the front. In the middle are the norm ones, or the normal ones, the wannabes, the better looking nerds, the slackers, the goths, the artists, the mature ones who don't give a cuss about cliques. And then at the bottom would be, these are the rejected people, these are the nerds, the ugly ones, the dorks, the targets, the outcasts, the floaters, the libs, if not good at sociability, and grubbies, the ones that dress in a grubby fashion. And of course, in Japan, it's just like everywhere else. I just read or my wife was just telling me that in Japan, when you go to school, you have to dye your hair black. I didn't realize that. Of course, this is after school. This is not at school. So when you go to school, this was in Tokyo, they just passed a law that you don't have to dye your hair black anymore. They didn't want people to look different. So as weird as that may seem, in Japan, if you are in school, you have to not only dress alike, but you also have to dye your hair black. Everywhere except in Tokyo. In Tokyo, you can have brown hair now, or blonde hair, I guess. Aggression and bullying. Children who seek dominance and control may be especially sensitive to slights, provocations, or other threats to their status. Instrumental aggressors view force and coercion as effective ways to get what they want. Studies agree that children seeing televised violence act more aggressively. According to Erickson, this is a time of identity versus identity confusion. The teenager's effort to make sense of the self is not a kind of maturational malaise. It is part of a healthy, vital process that builds on the achievements of earlier stages, trust, autonomy, initiative, and industry. It lays the groundwork for coping with the crises of adult life. And the joke says, after many years of therapy, Waldo finally finds himself. I think that's hilarious. Find Waldo. He finally found himself. Three major issues of identity: choice of occupation, values to believe in and live by, and satisfying sexual identity. This was a tough one. I can remember when I went through my identity crisis. I ran track in high school and college. So that was part of my identity. But part of my other identity was the fact that I was a Hoosier. I was somebody from Indiana. And when you go into the military, of course, you have the opportunity to discard who you were in the past. You can change who you were and become whoever you want to be. But I decided to maintain my Hoosier identity. And you might think, oh no, come on, everybody's from one place, and you never even think about it. Well, the reality is that when you move around as much as you do in the military, it's easy to start accepting or start acting like the people that you are around. So when I was in Texas, I could have started acting like somebody from Texas. When I was in Oklahoma, I could have started acting like somebody from Oklahoma. When I was in Mississippi, I could have started acting like the white people in Mississippi. But I decided that it was too important for me to identify with who I had been as I was growing up, my parents and all the people that I grew up with. I decided to maintain my Hoosier identity. The fact that I grew up on a farm, the fact that people from Indiana understand and know basketball, as weird as that is. And I decided to maintain my identity as an athlete. So I continued participating in athletics. When I was in the military, I played football, I played softball. What else did I do? That's it. I was in a superstar competition. Anyway, you've got to decide who you're going to be, and that's what you guys have done. That's one of the reasons you're going to school. You're studying to work in public health or to work in counseling or psychology. This you guys have already made this decision, and that's always important. Erickson's identity versus identity confusion, cliquishness, and intolerance of differences are both hallmarks of the adolescent social scene. They are defenses against identity confusion. This is one of the reasons why people reject other individuals. Individuals need a stable identity before reaching intimacy, and this may explain prolonged cohabitation and less frequent marriages that we see today. It also may, one of the things you might think about, there are a lot of males that will keep going out with their friends, just like they did in high school. And this they'll continue into their 30s and 40s. This may be the same thing. It's identity versus identity confusion. There's still an identity confusion. They don't want to change. They don't want to grow up. Therefore, they keep going out with their high school friends. If none of them are growing up and getting married, of course, we see this in movies all the time. Individuals, there will be three individuals in their late 20s and early 30s, and none of them are married, and none of them are in relationships, but they seem to be around each other all the time. This is, they just haven't grown up. They haven't decided to grow up. Marcia saw the struggle for individuation to establish one's own identity outside of one's parents as represented by four types of identity status. The first is identity achievement. This is where crisis leads to commitment. The second is identity foreclosure. This is where the individual has commitment but has never been in crisis. Identity moratorium is where the individual is in crisis but has no commitment yet. And the last is identity diffusion. This is where the individual has no commitment nor crisis. Ethnic factors in identity formation. For some adolescents, ethnicity may be central to identity formation. Many minority youth feel conflicts between values stressed at home and those dominant in the wider society. Adolescence is a time when sexual orientation becomes obvious to the individual. Historically, people kept their sexual orientation secret, but now they are more likely to come out, especially if it is a formerly rejected, or it was against the law for once upon a time to be gay. Now, of course, that is not the case. Gay marriage is acceptable. The Secretary of the Treasury, Pat Buttigieg, is gay, and he's married to a male, and he has a family. Who else has a family that we know? Wait a minute. Anderson Cooper is married to another man, and he has 2 children now. Okay, homophobia can make coming out traumatic. Parental rejection can be a concern. However, acceptance by peers may be increasing, of course. The kids don't care, but the parents seem to. Of course, it all depends on what era that you grew up in. Uh, Now things are more accepting. 20 years ago, of course, not that it was against the law in some states. So there was a lot of strange things going on. So people have strange ideas, and don't condemn the old people for their changing ideas. It's their ideas. It's not as easy for their brains to change. Electronic games are especially popular among boys. 94% of middle school students play. One-third of boys play every day. My grandson does. He's only 9 years old, and he plays Fortnite. And he wants to buy skins. Skins are different. I don't know, armor or something, and he's got like 40 of them. One of them is a marshmallow. Weird. 11% of girls will play every day, but one-third of boys will play every day. And he plays with his friends at school. He plays with some of the people that he plays soccer with, who live, 30 miles north or south of here. Favorite games involve violence. Fortnite could be related to anxiety and depression. The use may be related to feelings of power, fame, and dealing with stress. The kids may be using the games to achieve a cathartic effect on negative feelings. So they're trying to dissipate these negative feelings. The great majority of crimes are committed by young people between the ages of 12 and 25. Crime rates peak about age 18 and then they decline after that. This crime trend has been true for over 150 years. It is thought that this is true for two reasons: increased peer importance and independence from parents at around age 17 and 18. There are two types of delinquency: adolescents, limited delinquents who start getting into trouble as adolescents and then stop with adulthood because they grow up. And then, of course, there are the life course delinquents. This is persistent delinquents who start from birth and continue into adulthood. Types of depression: depressed mood, enduring period of sadness, no other related symptoms of depression. The major depressive disorders is a clinical diagnosis. It has specific symptoms: depressed mood, appetite disturbance, sleeping disturbance, and fatigue. Causes of depressed mood: conflicts, disappointments, poor performance in school. Girls are at higher risk than boys for depression. Two types of treatment. You can use therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is what is being used right now, and antidepressant medications. And this is really an interesting. This is somebody that is depressed. As you can see, wait a minute. Okay, let me do this again. So I've got an arrow. There we go. Okay, this is what people think. That people who are depressed, they're just sad. But the reality is, they feel, half of them feels nothing. Just a little portion of them feels sadness. They have self-loathing, they have anxiety, they have guilt, they have isolation, and they have feelings of hopelessness. This is what depression actually is. So if we are dealing with an individual who is suffering from depression, we just treat the sadness part. We just address the sadness part. We're not gonna get anywhere, because there is still lots that is going on in this person's brain, and we need to deal with the self-loathing, with the feeling of nothingness, with the feeling of isolation and hopelessness, guilt, and anxiety, as well as the sadness. Resilience: good outcomes in spite of threats to adaptation and development. Protective factors are individuals that are high in intelligence, people who have effective parenting, they have or adult mentors, they have high self-regulation, they have strong ethnic identity. This is important. This is the study that I did. I did a study on resilience, and I found that ethnic identity was extremely important in my research. And of course, religiosity can lead to resilience as well. And that is the end of the chapter. I know it took a long time, but we are finished. And so I'll see you next week.